The Great Train Robbery. In the early hours of August 8, 1963, one of the most daring crimes in British history unfolded on a quiet stretch of railway in Buckinghamshire. A Royal Mail train was en route from Glasgow to London, carrying millions of pounds in cash, the kind of money usually locked behind bank vaults, not rattling down tracks in steel carriages. A gang of 15 men, led by Bruce Reynolds, set out to steal it. The plan was audacious. Using a false railway signal rigged with a battery-powered lamp, the gang forced the train to stop in the middle of the night. Once halted, they overpowered the driver and uncoupled the locomotive and cash-filled carriages. Inside were 120 sacks of banknotes, worth more than £2.6 million, the equivalent of over 50 million in today's money. The gang loaded the loot into trucks and vanished into the darkness. It was a heist that stunned the nation, clean, coordinated, and executed with military precision. Newspapers hailed it as the crime of the century. Yet, as often happens in daring heists, the escape unraveled. The men hid at Leatherslade Farm, but left fingerprints and evidence behind. Over the next months, most were caught and sentenced to long prison terms. The myth, however, lived on. Ronnie Biggs, one of the robbers, escaped prison and spent decades as a fugitive in Brazil, turning the robbery into legend. Films, books, and endless speculation kept the story alive. The Great Train Robbery remains iconic not just for the money stolen, but for the sheer audacity of stopping a train and taking its treasure. It blurred the line between crime and folklore, proving that sometimes real-life heists can be more sensational than fiction. The Lufthansa Heist. On the night of December 11th, 1978, New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport became the scene of one of the boldest robberies in American history. Inside a Lufthansa cargo terminal sat millions of dollars in unmarked cash, freshly flown in from West Germany. For a crew of mob-connected thieves, it was an irresistible target. The plan was orchestrated by Jimmy Burke, an associate of the Lucchese crime family, later immortalized in the film Goodfellas. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, 6 masked men stormed the terminal. They subdued employees, tied them up, and forced a night shift worker with inside knowledge to open the vault. What they found inside exceeded all expectations, more than $5 million in cash and nearly $1 million in jewelry. In today's terms, that would equal over $25 million, making it the largest cash robbery ever committed on American soil at the time. The heist itself was executed almost flawlessly. The crew slipped away in minutes, leaving behind terrified but unharmed hostages. The problem came afterward. Burke, notorious for paranoia, feared the crew would draw attention by flaunting their riches. One by one, men connected to the job began to vanish. Bodies turned up in cars, alleys, and shallow graves. Nearly every participant, save for a few, met a violent end. Despite years of investigation, authorities never recovered the stolen money. Only one man, Louis Vermeer, the inside source at Lufthansa, was ever convicted in connection with the crime. Jimmy Burke was never formally charged with the robbery, though he was convicted on other charges and spent the rest of his life in prison. The Lufthansa heist endures as a story of greed and betrayal, where the perfect robbery dissolved into paranoia and bloodshed. It showed that in the world of organized crime, pulling off the job was only half the battle. Surviving afterward was far harder. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum Heist. On the night of March 18, 1990, Boston became the stage for the largest art theft in history. At the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, 2 men disguised as police officers arrived in the early hours, claiming to respond to a disturbance. The unsuspecting security guards allowed them inside, a decision that would cost the museum $500 million in lost treasures. Once inside, the imposters handcuffed the guards, tied them up in the basement, and roamed the galleries for more than 80 minutes. Their targets were not random. They sliced 13 works of art from their frames, including masterpieces by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, and Manet. Among the most famous was The Concert by Vermeer, Considered one of the most valuable stolen paintings in the world, the thieves left behind empty frames hanging on the walls, a haunting reminder of what had been taken. The stolen works were valued at more than $500 million, making the robbery the single largest art theft ever recorded. Despite massive investigations by the FBI and international agencies, the paintings have never been recovered. Over the years, countless theories have swirled. Some suspect organized crime groups in Boston, others point to international art smugglers, and still others believe the works were hidden locally, awaiting a deal that never came. Informants have offered tips, but every lead has collapsed into dead ends. Even today, the museum keeps the empty frames displayed, a symbol of loss and a plea for the art's return. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in criminal history. More than 30 years later, the paintings are still missing, the thieves never identified, and the world left to wonder if these masterpieces will ever surface again. The Antwerp Diamond Heist. In February of 2003, the world witnessed what many call the heist of the century. Deep in the heart of Belgium's Diamond District, thieves pulled off a robbery so meticulously planned that it seemed almost impossible. Their target was the Antwerp Diamond Center, a fortress-like vault said to be one of the most secure in the world. Yet a small crew, led by Italian thief Leonardo Notarbartolo, managed to walk away with an estimated $100 million in diamonds, gold, and jewelry. The vault was protected by multiple layers of security: a magnetic lock, heat sensors, motion detectors, seismic alarms, and a steel door nearly impossible to breach. But the thieves studied the site for years, even renting office space inside the building to observe guards and routines. On the weekend of February 15th, they struck. Using replicas of keys, careful timing, and tricks to disable the sensors, they slipped into the vault undetected. Inside, they opened more than 100 safe deposit boxes, filling bags with diamonds and gems. By the time guards discovered the breach on Monday morning, the gang was long gone. No alarms had sounded, and there was no sign of forced entry. Investigators were stunned. The system meant to be impenetrable had been quietly dismantled. The gang's downfall, however, came from carelessness. A plastic bag of sandwiches left along a highway contained DNA that led authorities to Notarbartolo and several of his crew. He was convicted, yet most of the loot was never recovered. To this day, the missing gems remain hidden, their fate unknown. The Antwerp Diamond Heist stands as a masterclass in patience, planning, and precision. It proved that no vault, no matter how advanced, is truly unbreakable when thieves have enough time, nerve, and ingenuity. The Banco Central Burglary. In August of 2005, Brazil witnessed a robbery so audacious, it seemed ripped from a Hollywood script. The target was the Banco Central in the city of Fortaleza, a heavily guarded institution that stored millions in cash. The thieves didn't storm the building with weapons. Instead, they tunneled underneath it. Over the course of 3 months, a crew posing as a landscaping company secretly dug a tunnel stretching more than 250 feet from a rented house to the bank's vault. The tunnel was reinforced with wood, had its own lighting system, and even ventilation. Neighbors thought the men were simply running a gardening business, never suspecting that the sound of machinery was part of Brazil's biggest heist in history. On the weekend of August 6th, the crew broke through the vault's concrete floor and helped themselves to what they found inside. More than 160 million reais, the equivalent of roughly $70 million at the time. The money was mostly unmarked banknotes, making it nearly impossible to trace. When employees arrived on Monday, the vault appeared untouched, until they saw the gaping hole. Investigators later called it one of the most sophisticated burglaries ever attempted. Authorities eventually arrested several of the men, but the majority of the money was never recovered. Only a fraction, buried in shallow pits or hidden in safe houses, was retrieved. The Banco Central Burglary shocked the world not only for its scale but for its method. No guns, no explosions, just patience, planning, and a tunnel that snaked its way into history. It was a reminder that sometimes the boldest heists are not about brute force, but about quietly outsmarting even the strongest vaults.